And now for a closer look at our top story. Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell announced a plan to avert the shutdown of the Department of Homeland Security. Democratic and Republican senators are fighting over whether the president abused his executive powers on immigration.
This is a disagreement not about funding Homeland Security. It's about our nation's immigration policy and the president's executive amnesty, an action which I believe is illegal. Congress is in place.
John Hudak is the author of Presidential Pork, the White House Influence Over the Distribution of Federal Grants. He's also a fellow in governance studies at the Brookings Institution, and I spoke with John earlier from Washington, D.C. John, welcome to Arise America. Thanks for taking a few minutes with us. Let's start with talking about this plan that Mitch McConnell has come up with doing a standalone bill that would circumvent having to vote on the bill with the provisions for Obama's immigration reform. First of all, is this a win for anybody, or is it a lose-lose for both sides?
Well, it's a win for Mitch McConnell because it shows a sensible approach to leadership. And early on in his role as Senate Majority Leader, he needs to show that he's willing to stand up in an effort to get things done. And frankly, this looks like the only possible way to get things done at this juncture.
So let's talk through his if you will, methodology. Practically, what would this look like if he could get his own party as well as some of the Democrats on board?
Sure. What it would look like is first there would be a vote on a clean funding bill for the Department of Homeland Security. After that passes, which it certainly would in the Senate would then take up independent measures that would seek to overturn or roll back the president's actions on immigration. Those would likely also pass. They may encounter a filibuster in the Senate. It depends on the procedure they use, but they would at least be held as an independent, separate vote apart from the funding bill.
Really, realistically, how much support do you think he can drum up for this?
Well, he'll have nearly universal support among Republicans. There are a few Democrats who have indicated that they may vote for it as well. And frankly, it's a win-win for some red state Democrats because they're not threatening the funding of Homeland Security, but they can also go home to their constituents and say, hey, I stood up to this president on an issue you care about. It's not clear he'll hit the 60 mark, though.
Yeah, and that's what's going to be necessary, and it's going to require Democrats for that. And I'm wondering, can you envision Democrats jumping on board, even those who have criticized the president, saying that his executive action is an overreach?
It's hard to see a sufficient number of Democrats coming on board, but what I think is more important is the timing at which these bills are brought up. You can imagine a scenario in which the Senate brings them up very close together, passes the clean funding bill, sends it back to the House, and immediately brings up these immigration bills. If they fail, it really confuses the House. The House may not be willing to pass something if the Senate can't pass its own immigration bills. So there's a question about the ability to move this in general.
Indeed, and let's talk about that because there are a few things that can muddy the water. There has been opining and frustration from Mitch McConnell, other Republicans, that the Democrats won't even allow this debate, the debate on the immigration issue, until a Department of Homeland Security budget is passed. How do you navigate those muddy waters?
Well, it's very difficult. It's not just difficult between the parties, but it's difficult between the houses of Congress. And frankly, a lot of this rhetoric is forced, and that's common in Washington. I'll say if the shoe was on the other foot and the Democrats were in charge and unable to pass a Homeland Security bill, the rhetoric would be pretty feisty. It has been in the past. But for McConnell, it's tough. He needs essentially to make sure things go well in the Senate and at the same time make sure things go well in the House, which isn't his job, but he needs to do that. And wrangling the House Republicans is tough work.
John, as I understand it, you don't think that President Obama particularly has overreached with this immigration reform. However, you understand the Republican reaction. Unpack your perspective a bit for us.
Sure. The president is generally relying on what's called enforcement discretion, and that's something the Supreme Court has held up as a presidential power where he has the ability to choose when and where enforcement priorities reach, given the understanding that the president in the executive branch doesn't have the funds or the time or the personnel to do everything everywhere. And so it rests generally on good law. At the same time, Republicans think the size of this reach is too much, and it's in a policy area that, frankly, is angering many of their constituents. And so it's in part a political anger with the president, but there's a legitimate policy concern among Republicans, as well as a concern over presidential power.
I'm all out of time, but yes or no, do you think they'll make the Friday deadline?
I'd be surprised if they do.
And there you have it, John Hudak. Thank you so much. Good to talk to you.
Thank you.